Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 1, we're up to Chapter 51, page Peites 89. In the last few chapters, he's been transitioning from immanent energy to transcendent energy, otherwise known as pnimi or makif. One is rooted in the divine allocation, assessment of the structure of existence, and one is rooted in that which is prior to that assessment, prior to that allocation. So one would be called habligvul, one is called the sher atzmai bekayach, the hagvul. One is the infinite energy, and one is an infinite energy that envisioned and assessed and prepared himself to create, to produce the structure of existence, which becomes the kav and then the 10 spheres as they manifest in containers. The other energy, transcendent energy, is beyond containers and is equal everywhere, and is within all of existence, but it's not containable by any particular level, and does not have levels and gradations as Iris and Kel. In the last chapter, and in understanding this, he goes into the discussion of the difference between ratzon and koiches. I've been defining ratzon as desire. Some people define it as will. Literally means will, but really will, desire is the same thing. Desire not as in pleasure, but desire as in will. And faculties, meaning the specific faculties, the 10 faculties that the soul has. So even though desire is a faculty, as he makes it clear, but it's a faculty that does not have its own independent identity, nor distinct location, as he puts it like this in the top of page Zayin, he says, Ima yeshu gamkin keich ma nefesh ratzon, that is, even though it's also a faculty of the soul, it's different than all the faculties because it's not mitzias dover. It's not substance. It doesn't have a mitzias dover. Mitzias dover is a substantial entity that has an identity, personality. Meaning that it does not have any identity, any type of mitzias outside of the nefesh. The kol keches, each one, every faculty has particular identity. There's chachma, there's bina, there's das, there's chesed, gvura, and so on. And as I explained, the faculties are like instruments. So they're also instruments of the soul, but they're distinct instruments, and each one has its particular container, its particular place, particular function. Desire, on the other hand, all it is, as he says, gili hanefesh. Gili hanefesh. Nitiyas hanefesh. Gili hanefesh means the nefesh revealing itself. Nitiyas hanefesh means the nefesh inclination or expression. So, as I want to elaborate, ratzon is a type of entity that's harder to relate to because every ratzon, every desire is connected to something. It desires something. So as soon as it desires something, it's using the other faculties. But desire alone, if you dissect any human act or any human interest, there's the desire part, which is just purely the soul's involvement, so to speak, its interest. And then there's the instruments that are necessary to fulfill that interest. So an artist desires to create a piece of art, the example we've been using. Without that desire, we're going nowhere. As he said in the first chapter, that the etzem, without ratzon, is just on its own. It's a self-contained etzem, essence. In God, of course, it's completely pure because there's no shape and form at all. In our being, it's hard. We also have that dimension, but still we are mortal, so it's harder to see ourselves as we're not atzmim, so to speak, self-contained. So but the bottom line is there is how you are before your desire. If you're not interested, simple on a simple basis, whether it's an issue of shalom bayis, or it's an issue of finding a job, or it's an issue of getting a project going. If you have no interest, it doesn't matter how great your instruments are. You could be the most brilliant person, the best heart, chesed, gvura, teferes, netzach, chayid, yisayid, malchus, chachma, bina, das, everything is there. One thing is missing, you're not interested. There's no desire. You see this all the time. So that's an example. On the other hand, if you have desire, but your instruments are either not functioning, God forbid, or they're flawed, or they're not trained, so there's equal problem. So when anything is getting done, you really need two things. You need to want, you need to desire. So that so-called representing your soul has to be interested in it. Why it's interested is another thing. You could say, well, why am I interested? Because of culture, because of years of habit, whatever it may be. It doesn't really matter right now. And then there's how it expressed. That's so-called the soul's involvement. It's interested. And then comes the instruments, each one in this particular way. And in chapter 49, the distinction, that's the distinction he made, and he added that since the instruments, the faculties are mitzias dovamad, they are substance and identity, so what they produce also has identity. Intelligence will produce ideas. Emotions will produce feelings. That product, even when you stop conceiving and the ideas stop flowing, whatever has been created, whatever has emerged from it, remains forever, embedded in your memory, or in communication to another, teaching another, or in writing. Same thing with the feeling. The goodness that you did, the kindness you bestowed upon another person, the result that you lifted their spirit remains. The aspect of the soul's desire, by definition, goes with the soul. As soon as you're not involved, the desire is no longer there. So let's say you desire to teach a student. While you're teaching the student, the desire is there, fine. It's representing your soul's interest wants to be there. Now you're teaching. Now it's over. The class is over. The teacher now has moved over to other things. So what remains is of course, the faculties aren't functioning either, but the faculty has left a result. The student has become wiser. The student knows something. He's just learned something. The student has nothing from the desire of the teacher any longer. Neither does the person, because the person has now moved on. The soul has now moved on to other matters. In other words, the ratzon is exactly like light. It goes with its source. The instruments are also, in their functionality, they go with their source. You're not using your mind if you don't want to use your mind. But being that they are identity and they have their instrument, the piece of art you've created has been created. Not just the piece of art, the idea, the feeling that it evoked in another, etc. That was chapter 49. In chapter 50, which we learned yesterday, he goes on and says that hislabshus hislabshus, because the ratzon is this type of so-called justice, as he keeps calling mitzias dovar, mitzias ayin, it's just the soul's reflection, so to speak. Again, the soul without desire means there's no interest. Soul with desire is interest. The instruments are what define how that interest manifests. As I said, it's probably hard to imagine a scenario where a person has only ratzon and doesn't have any faculties functioning. I mean, obviously there's a state where you can desire to do something, you're not acting on it yet. But every ratzon has to work with something. It's like, physically handicapped person, he has the ratzon, he doesn't have the tools. Okay. No, but there he's envisioning how he would use the tool. Okay, correct. Yeah, no. I'm saying in most scenarios there's something that's not pure. It's hard to see it undiluted. There's going to be some interaction.
Sure, even before you just went in a causal chain that's involved with it's caused by conditioning this and that.
Okay, that's what he's going to. Now he's going to say this. So in chapter 50, what he adds now is that all the faculties come into kelim, whereas ratzon does not have a place it resides for obvious reason, because it's representing the soul in general. It's not representing a specific manifestation of the soul in one particular instrument or tool or so on. And then he goes on to explain that the proof of that is haraya, says haraya, and also the demonstrator. He speaks about how the ratzon is different than the faculties in the fact in the issue of development and maturity and growth. In ratzon there's no growth, there's no change. The desire of a newborn and the desire of an old man may be different desires because they've developed maturity and so on. But the pure thing the soul is expressing, for a baby, the soul's expression is it wants food, it wants to sleep, it wants to be nurtured. It doesn't say that example, I'm just using it. Desire does not change. Meaning desire, not the desires, or the object of desires. Whereas the faculties, because they go into containers, he says, basically, it takes no time when a person desires to actualize it. You desire something, a second later it happens, instantaneously. Because the Ratzon doesn't have to travel, so to speak. Doesn't mean traveling, it means to say the Ratzon is not in one place and has to get to another place, so to speak. Okay? Whereas it comes to the faculties, he says, no, when the mind is functioning, the mind has to prepare itself to communicate, to where it's going to convey some message. And the container that is receiving that message has to be ready for that message. So he gives an example of, let's say, an artist. An artist, so if you're talking about moving your finger, that's instantaneous. But if you're talking about using your fingers to create art, which is already now using intelligence, it's not just a desire, it's a particular thing. There, you need to prepare yourself, you need to be trained, and you even have to train the tools themselves to be conditioned. You could have a person, for example, that has technique. I'll give the example. You teach children Aleph Beis Gimel. So first you teach them how to draw. That takes time. And then they need the habit of learning to do it many, many times until they perfect it. So basically he talks all about here, about how anything in the faculties requires time, development, the development of maturity, the development of growing into intellectually and emotionally more mature. Like he says, Yomim Yidabru v'Reiv Shonim Yabiu Chachma. He doesn't bring the Yabiu Chachma part. He just brings the Yidabru Dom. You need time. Maturity takes time. Desire does not mature. What matures is what desires you will have and how you express them. And like he says, it can conceal your so-called wild or untamed desires, and not necessarily in a negative way. Just the keches atzmi become more concealed as you become more mature adult. But they don't go through a maturity process. Whereas the faculties, both in the way they function, it takes time to train and to be trained. As he says, both ends of it. That the mashpia needs to prepare and the recipient needs to prepare. The mashpia needs to be mishayir, assess how he will teach, and then the student has to be ready to receive. That's a time process, because you're talking about hislabshus. You're talking about, as I said, a relationship. A relationship always requires time, because you're dealing with two forces that need to interact with each other, learn about each other, communicate, negotiate, discuss. Desire, as I mentioned, is like a commander. The soul wants. That's it. It desires. There's no relationship on its own. Obviously, because you desire something, and that desire may require a relationship, it's another story. But from the desire's perspective, it's the soul's interest, and that's all that matters. As such, there's no time involvement, there's no development, and so on.
I don't know if you can separate the child
But
will from child.
I'm sorry?
I don't know if you can separate a child's will from the child's emotion.
Can you separate an adult's will from an adult's emotion?
I think perhaps.
Well, that's why I said it's going to be difficult to envision, because you could explain that every desire that a person has comes because of their emotions. You could argue that with adults or children. People don't have pure desires. Their desires are based on a feeling, the emotion to something. You like something, so you desire it. You could argue that. It doesn't do with a child or an adult. Only thing adult has is mayach shal ta'alev. Only thing adult to do is control your. That's why I said you have to really dissect the two. Even if an emotion is what caused your desire, that doesn't mean that the desire is an emotion. Because you can have, let's say, you can look at something and naturally like it and still not desire it because you don't want to desire it. You can say, I'm not interested in it. It's not according to the Torah. I'm not interested. You can. So in other words, an emotion is a reaction, emotional reaction to something, is not the soul's interest. The emotion can take control of your soul's desire and say, now, come with me. That's what means, you look at something and then it pulls you.
You could like something, but block your desire to it because the Torah prohibits it.
And then there's the opposite way. You could have something that emotionally doesn't draw you, but your soul has interest in that thing. The point of the matter is, this is not, you're going to find situations where you need to separate the two. The fact that a child, for example, naturally will cry when it needs to be fed. Okay, yes, God created a biological sex when the body feels hungry. So we go and find food, or we go and ask. A child, just the only way it can do is cry. Doesn't have yet developed intelligence of how. But the fact that a soul desires something, the child has as well. You don't talk a newborn, let's talk a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old says, I want to go play. And a 50-year-old says, I want to go learn. And an 80-year-old says, I want to go play golf, whatever. I want to... no, I'm just using examples. That want, the word want, I desire, is absolutely, there's no maturity involved in that at all. The maturity is what you'll want and what you'll desire. Why you should desire those things. The point here is that there's a representative of the soul all the time called desire. You could have everything else in place, all the techniques and all the instruments, but if there's no desire, there's no will, the soul is not there. On the other hand, the soul can want something, desire something, and also not be actualized if the faculties are not functioning as well. So you need to have both. And one is subject to training and growth and development, and one is not.
Which one is not?
You have two guesses. Tell me which.
No, because a minute ago you just said...
The desire is not.
No, a minute ago you just said it could be the result of conditioning. You're very clear on this, and I repeat it and you agreed. You said it was called...
And I said the next half of the sentence was, it makes no difference what causes it. Because all it is, you just need the soul's interests. I mean, that's
a causal thing as compared with chachma.
That
comes out of the air. It's like
no, not at all. No, 1 second. I said it's going to be maybe hard to find a scenario where you can just describe a soul's desire without analyzing how that desire emerged. But that may be difficult. But it doesn't mean that you can't dissect any particular act into two parts.
Okay,
it makes no difference what the cause. He's not talking about cause now. He's not talking about why a person desires something. He's talking what is desire. When a person does desire.
So you're saying now it's really something that's causeless.
No, I'm not talking about cause. I just said it's not discussing cause. Cause is irrelevant here. Here he's talking about dissecting the nature of the desire, not its cause. Okay. The cause could be, you could say a neshama is connected to God, and therefore nishta will, nishta can, sein abgerissen von aller. Not he wants, desire, and not he wants, and not he could be separated from God. So that explained there would be is because the soul is fundamentally part of its source. So its desire is to be one with the source. So the cause is godliness. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about how does it work. Now, the next step would be, the soul says, I want to study God. I want to understand my God. That it doesn't say anywhere, a neshama can't live without understanding God. The expression is, a soul cannot exist be disconnected from God. What means to be connected to God? It could be something that doesn't even manifest in davening, learning, or mitzvahs. Whatever connection to God means. It means that when you challenge that person and say, like he brings in Tanya, that even a noshim pshutim, kal shebekalim, you challenge him, they'll be a mesiras nefesh. My point is that it's not there. All that matters is the soul's interest. That's all that matters. And as soon as that interest is gone, the desire, everything connected to that desire is gone.
But does that include both nefeshes, nefesh peace, and nefesh?
Again, we're going completely not discussing. It makes no difference here.
I understand that, Jeff. I don't know
what difference does it make? It doesn't make a difference. Whatever desire, if it's a desire to do something positive, a desire to do something negative, it's a desire of the soul at that moment. The soul has interest. It's an interest of the soul. The soul could be without interest. The soul could have interest. Then there's a whole other level, instruments and tools. I mentioned an artist desires to create a piece of art. Why can't we just talk about that? Why is that not clear? And he's not yet gone and actualized it. That means he has interest to do it. He may never actualize it. Now he may have all the tools to actualize it and not have the desire. That's the section we're talking about. What is the? I'm saying, I'm not trying to say that it's not complicated, but use certain examples. If you start using other examples, why did the artist have the desire to have the art? Maybe he saw another artist and he became competitive and jealous. Fine, that may be the cause. That's irrelevant to the fact. Sometimes maybe he didn't get inspired by someone else and he doesn't have a desire. The bottom line is that in the functionality of a human being, from let's call it the essence of your soul, that's asleep and not interested in anything, to getting something done, he's has to go through Ratzon and then through Kaiches. And they function differently. That's the key thing that he's saying here. It makes no difference. Here it doesn't seem to make a difference if it's nafshal kis, nafshal bamis, good or bad. He's not talking about it. He's not even discussing. His examples have been, the only example was doing a favor for another person. So the favor, the goodness, the lifting up that person's spirit remains. But technically, God forbid, if you said something negative to someone and you left them you left them depressed, it has the same example. That's just a matter of why would you use a negative example? There's no reason. Yeah?
No, it doesn't have to be that the Ratzi is before the Kaiches. It could be that the Ratzi comes after the Kaiches.
No. You could have, as you said, you could be walking down the street, you see something, and that evokes in you a desire, and then you get involved. So you could have technically, and let's put it this way, it's hard to answer that. It could be the catalyst was outside of you, but it has to spark the desire, or else you're not going there. You're walking down the street and you're going the one way. So you see something that may interest you to go that way. You may not go. If you don't go, then the keiches didn't, it meant nothing that you saw it. So what? If you did, it caused you to, it awakened your soul's interest, so to speak.
What I would say is, I'm trying to go on another track. For example, it says just do it, and then it will bring the desire, the genuine desire. Like you might not have that desire now, but by doing the rituals, by doing the mitzvahs, that can invoke the desire genuinely.
I would not go there. It gets complicated when you start saying that, because you see, the Shlei L'Shma Bo L'Shma, you could explain, is not about the desire. It's more why you're doing it, for ulterior motives or for pure motives. See, desire doesn't have to be necessarily pure. You could have a desire and do something Shlei L'Shma and stay Shlei L'Shma, still there's a desire.
But we'd be saying at the end, Shlei L'Shma Bo L'Shma, we want
I wouldn't stick it into this discussion. It's to me, it goes, because like I just said, let's say a person doesn't come to L'Shma, but he desires to do ritual because whatever. Not because he's coming to L'Shma, because he's been trained to do that. Right. So his desire is there.
But being good at the training, after doing the training, maybe that can evoke the genuine desire.
But see, genuine and not genuine desire, that is something that is not part of the discussion. What means genuine desire not? Why, when someone does something to make money from it, is it not a genuine desire? If someone does it for God, it's more genuine. It doesn't say that here. Here he's not talking about the Kedusha of it. In other words, if a person does something Shlei L'Shma, there's a desire involved. I don't care what the reason is. The reason may be, you see, but you're using desire in a different context, not what he's saying here. I would not use that here at all. Me confuses because I'm not sure where it goes. It's like you're talking now already another sugya completely. Here he's talking really, I think you have to he's stripping it to basic functionality, what we're talking here, without any applications yet in Aveda, except the matter that you need someone's interest. Like you have students in the school who are brilliantly talented, but they have no interest. And you have people who are very, very much interested, and they're not so talented. The argument that you can make, the question I had in the last chapter, if there was a scientist sitting here, or a neuroscientist, what they could argue, is what we're calling here desire Ratzon is basically the brain and its central nervous system. In other words, yes, there is. We all agree there's a soul. Call it the source of energy of life. So there's a soul. It's giving energy. Okay, so the fact that we're alive, we all understand, is a very amorphous thing. That would be like the soul's energy. It gives life to the body from head to toe. Okay. Then comes the process. How do human beings process things? So a neuroscientist would say there's an unconscious, and then there's a conscious intelligence. So, and there's a very complex series of factors that causes people to begin the process going. As you said, it could be something, you see something, it evokes something. It could be a distant memory. It could be something that you don't even remember. You don't even know why I'm interested in this. Why is one person interested in this and that? It can be back from your childhood. Who knows? No, whatever. No, I'm not getting now into the particular cause. Let's talk now. Once something has sparked human beings' interest, what's the process? The process is that the neurons in the brain begin to send messages. And those messages go into the different parts of the body, and you start acting or not acting on it, etc., etc. And bottom line, in the neuroscience, the question would be whether a neuroscientist has any room or need for this level called desire. So you could just say that's what it is. And we're not talking now about the brain training the arms and the legs to dance or to that's another part. We're talking about the process before that, the interest in doing that. So I would respond if someone said that. I mean, again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I'm just speaking that language, that no matter how, even in neuroscience, you may call it something else. What Chassidus calls ratzon, desire, is what a neuroscientist would call those first sparks that cause a person to want to be inclined. We're not getting to why. And yes, there's no problem that ratzon, the first thing it does is charges neurons that will start sending messages. No problem. For example, I desire now to move my finger. Instantaneous. No one's saying that there's necessarily ratzon in my finger. It's saying that there's a force inside the human body that doesn't have a particular container that desires something and immediately has control over your body. I cannot do it to your finger. For example, my ratzon can only affect my body, and instantaneously.
There are some type of people that can.
I understand, but I'm talking now without. For me to do it to you, you have to either convince you or train you and so on. Again, I'm not talking about magical power now. So the ratzon does definitely charge, because what is the functionality? How does the finger actually know that my desire wants it to move? There's no problem saying that there's nerves that communicate to that finger. And that's also instantaneous. You know? Does it take longer to move your toe than to move your finger? Because it's lower down? It's instantaneous relative to training somebody to write or to think or to draw and so on. In that sense, it's instantaneous. See, I always consider this when it talks about this thing of this instantaneous. It always seemed like the ratzon is everywhere, and it's true. It is. The question whether it's connected to the nerves everywhere. In Chassidus, in my mother, I think in derech a few places he does speak about the nerves, but the instantaneous element, does it travel at the speed of light? A message from the brain to the body?
No, it goes less. It depends on the fiber. There's chemicals released.
But let's say the best canary, the most conditioned person.
I don't know, there are different fibers that...
Okay, fine, doesn't matter. I don't think it changes much here regarding to the discussion. But here, clearly in this chapter, the point is that it doesn't require the training and the conditioning and the development that comes with the stages, that when it's Eris and Kalim. That's very, very clear. That desire does not need Eris and Kalim because it doesn't need to train. Even little children have reflexes that are just instantaneous in that sense, or immediate. Okay, that's chapter 50. The point, of course, being to not get away from the main point, the big focus here, is to understand transcendence, is to understand that which is not defined by the structure of existence. The whole point here is trying to come to how can we, mortals in a human structure and a cosmic structure, connect to the ratzon, connect to this deeper place. In other words, in psychologically speaking, when we connect as human beings with each other, you could say we connect, my mind connects to your mind, my heart connects to your heart. Can my desire connect to your desire? Can my soul connect to your soul? Obviously that creates a much deeper relationship. Because you could say, you know what, we're only connected on a functional level. We either have something in common interest or not. So we get together and we share that interest. Here, of course, obviously, if you can connect also Ratzon to Ratzon, so to speak, so then you're connecting that your soul's inclinations, your soul's desires, your soul's interests, and my soul's interests are one. You're talking about a real neshama connection.
That's what the goal of shidduch.
Huh? That's the goal of a shidduch, is the goal of our relationship with God. It shouldn't just be on a functional level, it should be on that deeper level.
Shema, we do it.
Yeah. So I'm saying, to bring it back to the picture, all these examples...
If you say every yid then is connected on a soul level to every other yid because we both have the same desire.
No, correct, but you want it to be, you want it to be a combination of being conscious of that as well. Yeah, fundamentally that's true. Remember, at the end of the day, like you said in the end of Nachum, you said that the makif should be made in the pnimi. It's true. You could say we have a connection to that transcendent dimension, but then we're not aware of it, and we have obviously the goal in this whole process is that you should have the chibur, the fusion of makif and pnimi, transcendence and immanence. Look, the mila of the whole structure, that the first 40, as he said, he spoke of the chapter from chapter 2 to here, the first 48 chapters, was God wants this structure. At the end of the day, remember, that was the whole thing of the Esser spheres. Everything is in order for there to be this structure. The question is now that this structure, now we have Eris and Kalim, how do we go back to the Eris before the Kalim? Or even beyond that, to the energy that is, to connecting to the divine essence, so to speak, to the levels that are higher. That's the context. I just wanted to not lose it as we're just going through the details, breaking it down. That's the context of it all, both on a human level and on look. You could have. I've recently dealt with a couple. There's no question in my mind they love each other, and they have a deep connection. But because their instruments and their faculties were not really there or properly trained, they screwed up their lives. Basically, they destroyed their lives. And when you try to look for the spark of the connection, they both will say, well, I think we have it, but it's been so many years and so much damage, that done. So that's obviously not the goal. So the connection is there, but who does it help if they're both not conscious of it and they can't do anything about it? So the challenge is, how do you reignite the connection and make sure now not only that the faculties don't disturb it, but they actually support it. So that's that takes time. I'm pointing out only that there's a real nafkamina, there's a real application of understanding this transcendent level. It's not just a nice discussion about Ratzon. I'm saying it also because it helps ground like where we're going here. Because we can go off and just talk about it so abstractly and say, okay, so what's the point? So now we know Ratzon doesn't have a container and it moves very quickly. But there's a point to it, that there's a part of us that is so-called, that a part of it that's conditioned and develops and grows, and there's a part of the soul's involvement. I mean, I really think, at the end of the day, I would love to have a discussion with a neuroscientist about this, but at the end of the day, this is extremely eloquent and powerful, and I would say compelling, and very resonating picture of a human being.
It's also outside
because it's clear. There's no question when you see this, even though, it may be hard to dissect scientifically where, what, when, but the idea that the soul has interest or doesn't have interest, and then there's the faculties, is very clear. There's two things. There's no question about it. I mean, I don't need even faith for that. It's completely logical, based on observing human beings. That's what you see it all the time.
And it's outside the nervous system. When you're talking about faculties already, you're going in the nervous system.
Okay, so the question is, so good. So the thing is, you see, neuroscientists, science, just like physics, can only reach the things that they can empirically measure. You can look, even though the brain is extremely difficult, but today we know there are neurons, there are parts of the brain that begin to activate when you do certain things. You see this. My brother-in-law, just telling you about it, has a stroke. You sing a niggun, a song, is no problem. Words is a problem. And it's two different parts of the brain, completely. So clearly, you see, in science, you could identify so-called the first place in the physiology and neurology of a human being where things begin. Obviously, he's going here a step before, because the soul, you cannot put on a slab. There's no microscope. What does the soul look like? All we know about the soul is its functions, its effects on us. So it's true. When you talk about Ratzon, desire, you're talking about a faculty of the soul that is precisely what he's saying. If it wasn't a keli, we'd be able to define it. Maybe that's a good way to put it. A brain, you can analyze, because it's in a container. So you go to the container and look for it. Where are you going to find desire? Desire is in the domain of the soul, and the soul can't be dissected. So how are you going to figure out? But we know that there's an expression. We know that the soul either has interest or doesn't have interest.
That would bother me. Why can't you say that it's in the brain?
No, he's right. Because fundamentally, what do you mean in the brain? It manifests through the brain. The brain is its so-called first, like this because the soul's interest. Let's say, because you could have a perfect brain, and God forbid not have a soul. Not you. A person could have a brain. There has to be something. Just like the soul is the soul in the brain. Some scientists say that. You have to say the soul is beyond the brain. It may rest, and it may be its first place of where contact. No,
It says the blood.
Doesn't it say that Chassidus in Tanya that the Mishkan
Mishkan ha-seichel is b'meach.
doesn't it say it?
Yeah, but it's not the nefesh. It's a nefesh l'kis already as it's a functional nefesh l'kis. Yeah, it says it in Tanya. And Mishkan nefesh abamis is in the heart. I'm talking about the neshama as the.
Besides talking blood.
The tzelem elikim part. One second, I'm not talking now.
Beyond the.
Yeah. I'm talking about the soul here now, either as a life force, period, or as a piece of, like the soul before it came to the body. Let's put it this way: nefesh l'kis had an entity before. Once I didn't say it doesn't manifest there. I didn't say, of course, it manifests inside. But like we spoke about neshama, there's nefesh, ruach, neshama, chay, yechida. Let me just say that nefesh manifests in a hislabshus way. They say nefesh l'kis, nefesh abamis. We talk about ruach now of the neshama, or neshama or chay, yechida. It says it's inside of you, but it's not inside of you. It's not inside someone else. But you can't identify it in a particular, It's like keiches hamakif. Listen, at the end of the day, Ratzon is a keich makif. As soon as it's a makif, it means it's beyond any type of the mind. The intelligence of the mind is in the brain. If anything, Ratzon works through the brain, and that's the first. Like it's the central nervous system. The Ratzon has to tell the brain, send the message here, send the message. The point of the matter is, it is ultimately, definitely a keich makif. That's clear, which means that it's, like he said before about in Tanya, he says that makif seviv, ein pirushus seviv makif mamayla. He says in Tanya, only pirushus you can't contain it. Makif doesn't mean that it's not in; it just means it's not containable in a particular fashion. So it's in us, but not defined by any of the particular structure. Okay, now let's go to Nun Aleph, chapter 51. And now the way, after discussing how Ratzon and Keiches, how desire and the faculties develop different, one develops and one is just there, he's now speaking about the way Ratzon, the way the desire transmits into all the faculties, ve'avarim, and organs, that's nimshach. So he's adding now like this: that when desire is there, the etzem of the person is there. Meaning that if you're not really want to be there, your etzem is not there. Loirak ha'ara levad, not just a reflection. Ha'ara meaning, well, let's see what he means. Kamoi b'shari keiches. Like in the other faculties, that what transmits to the lower faculty is only a reflection. You know the expression "Makam shadetzein shaladam shamhu." Person where a person desires to be, that's where he is. There's something about desire that he's going to explain now that brings, I don't say the word all of you, but the essence of you there. So, for instance, I mentioned a student that is forced to study, but he's not interested. So you could say you have something there because he's there, and he's probably making 10% effort, but you can't call it his etzem is there. Etzem here, don't confuse it with atzmus. We're not talking about etzem haneshama. We're not talking about etzem that you're fundamentally good and godly. We're talking here etzem is composed of ha'ara. Ha'ara means a diminished reflection of something. Like when you say ha'ara, like you say, let's say, I'm trying to find a good example. Ha'ara. You cannot contain when, for example, when a teacher teaches something and gives an example of an example of an example, I wouldn't call that really ha'ara. The sun giving a light down to this earth. So if you're right inside the sun, you wouldn't be able to see, you wouldn't be able to exist. Some reflection. Yeah, it's a reflection means a diminished and a more superficial form of whatever it is as transmitting. Etzem would be that there's more of the essential source there. I'll try to explain it as we go along. I'm looking for the right words. I don't have exact words. Yeah. Here we go. Also gamken. The seichel. See there. The intelligence that also transmits into all the organs. Gam biyad uberegel. Also in the arm and in the leg. The essence of the energy of the mind is not going to the arm and to the leg. Only an outer reflection of. Which means the arm and the hand do not become intelligent entities. Like when you use your fingers to write something, or you walk with an intelligent manner, you dance with an organized way, it's not like suddenly seichel went into the hand. Part of the seichel, a reflection of the seichel, is communicating to the hand, which it cannot communicate, let's say, to another part of the body. If you notice, in the last few chapters, he keeps going back to chapter 2. Because all this is really concluding that which he began then, and then went into a whole discussion of Eretz Pnimi and the faculties. So he keeps referring back. Like we discussed before in chapter 2. The that what manifests from the intelligence into the Mekayach HaMaisa, into your how would you call it Mekayach HaMaisa? Your power, your action, your faculty of Vahiluch, and Mekayach HaMaisa means anything you do, any act, Vahiluch and movement. Hurach Chitzeni is the Chitzeni Bilvad Ma'aseichel. It's only the outer and the outer. It's saying the outer dimension of the outer dimension of the intelligence. The essence of seichel is the intelligence in the brain, in the mind, in the head. The mind in the head. Simply put, when we conceive chachma, bina, and das, when we are in the process of burning the rubber, right? Where we're struggling to try to conceive and understand an idea. That is atzmus ha-seichel, in this context. When the seichel is telling the rest of the body, do this, do that, or it's even training it to do it in an organized way. It's telling the fingers, here, write something beautiful, powerful, intelligent. There, the fingers are only getting a ha'ara, a reflection, chitzenis de chitzenis. Like he explained there. And that's why is that the case? Why can't the atzmus ha-seichel go into the rest of the body? Because the mayach, the brain, the mind, is the container for the energy, for the air of the seichel. So here too we need to dissect it. This too needs explanation. Besides the fact that I just explained that desire is a type of makif, a type of invisible, you could say, or non-substantial, non-physical, what I wanted to use was shapeless type of desire from the soul. Remember, the faculties too, there's the Eir HaSeichel and there's the Kli HaSeichel. There's also, like he explained there, there's the, you could have the physical brain and you don't have the power of intelligence, just like you don't have the power of desire. So it's another power that's needed to be understood. You can have the physical eye, and then there's the Koyach Hariyah, and there's the Ratzon, Liris. So you really need three things to really get anything going. You need a container, you need the energy in the container, and then you need the desire to want to do it. So he also did the same thing. So when it comes to this, the first two things I just said, that Eir and Keli, they work hand in hand together. So the Meich is a Keli Eir HaSeichel, Shusham b'bchinis hislabshus mamish. The intelligence is mamish b'islabshus. It's mamish, literally integrated into the container. Umeir sham atzmus ha-seichel. And that's where the essence of the seichel radiates. And the other organs are just received from the mind, from the brain. Not that they themselves are containers. They're containers for other functions. So even though they're not containers, nevertheless, as we explained in the last chapter, they need achana, they need preparation. Shabbat Somes. Shabbat Somes. This is the Me'er Shabbat Somes. Okay, he's talking about the bone marrow. U'bederech klal ha'lachluchis v'hashamnunis shebe'evarim. And in general, the lachluch is the moisture, and the shamnuni is the fat in the organs. Okay. He's saying like this, that even though they're not a container, but they're also not like, for example, a table, but not a table. But take any object, is not a container for the soul's energy and for the intelligence. The body, at the end of the day, yes, the fingers and the arms and the legs and everything are not a container for intelligence like the brain is, but they're a container that is somewhat, what's the word for it? Conducive to the energy that goes inside of them. So he's saying, Hamoyach Shabbat Somis. For example, the bones are not just dry, dead bones. They have in them marrow. They have in them they have a force, a life, that makes them capable and prepared to receive the body's energy, the soul's energy and its intelligence. And in general, the moisture and the fat within the body, within the organs, is what allows that to happen. For example, God forbid, when any of those elements are missing, that part of the body can atrophy and need to be, God forbid, amputated, because it becomes a dead weight. So, point he's just adding that even though they're not fundamental keli. You can't say that the hands are keli for seichel, but they're a keli for they are more conducive than other things that are completely not kelim and containers. Being that they're not full container for the seichel of the intelligence, and them that radiates only a reflection of the seichel, and only its external, its outer dimension. I want to explain what ha'ara is and what chitzenius is, because he clearly identifies them. Ha'ara, I would say, is that it's not the full. Ha'ara would be more like qualitative, and chitzenius is more, I think, quantitative. Well, I'll tell you what I mean by that. Ha'ara would be that it's not the full brain power that's working, as when you're, let's say, conceiving or contemplating on ideas. Chitzenius HaSeichel would mean that it's getting only an external dimension of what Seichel is expressing. So I'll explain what I'm saying. Let's say a writer. So you're writing or typing an idea that you're coming definitely from your brain, that's traveling through your fingers. So the fingers are, number one, they're not, the full brain power is not in the fingers. The full brain power is when you're sitting and contemplating and really thinking it through. Fingers are more instruments, now you're going to communicate it. So number one is the whole brain power, the whole intense brain power is not there. It's only ha'ara, only reflection. Chitzenius is that even what you express that is seichel, not just even the part that is seichel, no, but even the part that does have brain power, has something, is only an external dimension of what the brain is really capable of. That's how I would define. So one is about the energy of the brain, and the other is the intelligence of the brain. And in the other evarim, they're both either only a ha'ara, they're both only a reflection and only an external dimension. On the other hand, desire, will, desire, that does not have a particular container. So besides what he said before, the first consequence of Ratzon not having a container is that it doesn't take any time for it to develop, for it to move, for it to travel, for it to grow, both within the body and over the years. The second thing in this chapter he's discussing, because it has no particular container, so the way it manifests, the way it transmits, that it's essential. What you see is what you get, basically. Chachma goes through gradations, just like a teacher has to teach. I mean, it's very much connected to what he said earlier. Why is it that we have to go through development and growth in our intelligence, our emotions? Because it's in containers. We are a developed structure. The structure has to develop step by step. If it went immediately, If suddenly what you saw, what you got from the day one, the whole structure that as we know it as human beings wouldn't exist. Education is not just an incidental thing. It's built in. Education and training is helping a person grow from one place to the next. Ratzon is what you see is what you get, so to speak. A desire, blah, there's no tzimtzum. There's no steps, there's no training, and so on. Because the ratzon is not defined by any container, it's not defined by structure. So when it manifests, it manifests. When it doesn't, it doesn't. Even though he said in the previous chapter that ratzon can be concealed, because over the years, what controls the human being, but that's only because what dominates in your life is not your desires. An adult, he said before, has the internal faculties are the ones that run your life. You don't just follow every desire that comes your way. But when a desire is a desire, it's atmusin nimsha b'chol makim. Now he's adding that. And that's why the way Ratzon affects pulas, the function of Ratzon, how it effectuates in all the organs and the faculties, is shlita, is a way of shlita and mamshala. Shlita, coercion, forcing, shlita and mamshala, like a ordered, forced. It's not really the word for shlita. Mamshala means like a commander. It doesn't ask you. It orders you. You say shlita and mamshala. It is kesser. Shlita and mamshala. The difference is shlita, shelit, is to dominate, and mamshala means to rule. Yeah, but it's like we say, machuse beratzon kibla aleim. Mamshaltecha b'chol der. Machuse is beratzon. That's not this ratzon. It's the ratzon of the. And mamshala is basically like a king's authority. It's with authority. That's the word I was looking for. It's in a form of authority. Not like the effect of seichel that also affects all the faculties. Just to compare the two, they both affect the faculties. But in this case, she'ein zeh b'derech shlita. When intelligence affects the faculties, it's not through dominion, it's not through domination, or through authority and command, order. Like for example, when you say the mind controls the heart, shalit. The word shalit is using actually. Even though shalit is shlita. Okay, but he's going to say. So Me'er Shalat means mind over heart. It means in Tanya Perek Beis from Zayar Pinchas. She'ein zeh b'derech memshala kim b'chinas pnimi. It's not in the form of memshala, meaning I command, I order you, but it's in the form of pnimi. It's an internalized way. It convinces the heart. It does not order the heart. Shapel b'midah sheyu k'fi anhogas haseichel. In an internalized way, it affects the midas that it should be governed by. It should follow the governance of the mind.
Rational, more rational.
This is also discussed in chapter 2. That's like meichen over midas. And it's also a form of training and education. Intelligence teaches, and manig, and is like a role model. It's a guide. It teaches and guides the midas, right? Now we also have a situation where intelligence can cause bittul in the midas, can basically subjugate them, or bittul b'midas. The liyah shameichem be'etzem hem b'chinas bittul, hayem pe'el bittul b'midas gamke. In other words, midas on their own are yesh. I want this, I want that. We discussed that earlier. It's good for me, I want it. I desire it. Let's take away the word desire. It's not to get confusion here. Midah, I like this, I like that. Moichen, because Moichen fundamentally doesn't think in terms of I like it, I don't like it, as we learned earlier. It talks about the subject matter itself. It could even come to the conclusion that it's good, but it doesn't yet say it's good for me. Because Moichen, they fundamentally are bittul, because their focus is on the truth of the matter, not on what's in it for me. They also affect that the midas should have that type of so-called humility, lack of narcissism and egocentrism. So basically he just said three things, I think, that the mind how the mind affects. Number one is that it communicates with it. It affects it. It doesn't order it. It's not just plain authority. And he says it's a form of training teaching, training, and guidance. And now also, and it could even bring something more. Not just that it guides the midas, it also influences them to have some bittul. Va'ikir in the parentheses now. How long does this parenthesis go?
Half a line.
Oh, very good. You're right. I just didn't see that. Va'ikiru mebchinas hachachma. And the main primary function of bittul in the midas is chacham, like it says elsewhere. This is vital because if you remember before, he spoke about chachma and bina. Chachma is ayin and bina is yesh. So that's why he's adding here. I assume that's why he's adding that the primary role of the bittul into the midas comes from bina. Could also be a guide of the midas, but the primary bittul, its selflessness, comes from chachma, like it says elsewhere, because chachma itself is ayin and bittul, which is of course a central theme of Ayin Beis altogether.
Maybe bittul means compromise more. The word bittul there means compromise.
Well, but you see, when he says "hamoichin be'etzem hem b'chinas bittul," it doesn't mean the moichin are fundamentally compromisers. It means moichin are fundamentally not self.
Right, but when they fail bittul in the midas,
You could say that. I would say more than that. I'd probably say more than just compromise, because that you can convince midas they should compromise. It's for their interest to compromise. Here it looks to me like it's saying more that it's teaching the midas to have a little more edelkeit. I mean, look, that's a good step too. The midas can have no compromise. I'm saying compromise. Then bittul, I think, is more than just compromise. V'zeu kasher hamidas einam b'izgabrus, and that's when the midas are not in intensity, full bizgabus, meaning os bizgabus, they're in a dominating state. Bizgabus. Oz hameichim pilim b'hem bittul. That's when the intelligence can cause them to have some bittul, some humility. V'hainu shein kamekelim ela meichin, and that is because this means because they're like containers to the intelligence. In other words, he's explaining how moich and midas are not like rotzen. Why are the midas affected this way? Why can the moichin? Okay, yes, when the midas are full intensity, it's going to be hard to harness and train them. But why? What can you do that? Because they're like kelim to the moichin. He says kamoi kelim. It's not like a keli. It's not like the brain is a container to the intelligence. But midas are somewhat of containers. They're receptive to the intelligence. The kashar midas hein beizgabres ef shala meichin liful behem habitl. Oh, that's only proving that you can't force. That's it. It's also part of memshala. That's the word. Because when midas are in full intensity, are intense, and very strong and dominating, the mind cannot affect them, cannot cause them to have bittul. Kim kasher einam bizgabros. It's only when they are not dominating and not that wild, not untamed. He's going to say, of course, rotzen, which because of memshala can do it even when they're wild, because it has that power of dominion. Because now the effect of intelligence on emotions is in two ways. Or they cause a weakness. They weaken the emotional intensity. And this is what happens on the level of the outer dimension of intelligence, which means, what does that mean? It means intelligence has a relationship with emotions. Remember, we learned that before also. There's moich be'etzem, where you're just contemplating an idea, there's no connection to any subjectivity, to any, is it good, is it not good? It's pure abstract thinking, theoretical thinking. Here we're talking already how the moich is an outer level of the moich that's already impacting on the midas. And what it does is, he's saying, is that it weakens them. The reflection of the intelligence, because this intelligence is already thinking about, so-called on the terms of the midas, is already thinking about, is this a good thing or not? Like for example, when a person is contemplating on theoretical physics, or some theoretical concept, let's say rotzen or atzmos, that's, moich. When a person is thinking, okay, now something came my way, is this good? Should I take this offer or should I not take this offer? There's also intelligence. But it's an intelligence that's related to, is this thing good for me or not good for me? So the intelligence is invested now, so-called, in the emotional implications of the matter. So it's not the same type of level of meichen, but it's a meichen that's speaking now to the midas. So you could explain to the midah, here you had a great offer, it's very seductive, but let me tell you something. Emotionally it sounds appealing, but if you look a little deeper, you'll see this is not a good investment. Or it's maybe dangerous. Looks like a good candy, but it's really poisonous. I'm just giving you an example. So the meichen, it's only a chetzenis meichen, and what it's doing, it's weakening the midah, because the midah is not the complete idiot, so to speak, or the midah is a keli to receive. He's speaking about the two ways meichen affects the midas. So it weakens. So since this is like a lower science, you're not talking theoretical physics or deep levels to the midah, you're talking on its terms. So therefore, it's understandable by the emotion. This weakens the intensity of the midah that wanted this thing, desired it, felt it was drawn to it. To behave according to the guidance of the mind. So the mind, warned, or so to speak, trained and showed. That's one way that meichen affects the midas. So he's really analyzing here how eres b'kelim work, how immanent energy works, as opposed to ratzon. Another way is that the midas are not like the mind tells the midah, hey, this is not such a good thing, and the midah relates to it, and so on. Or the midas mizbatlim memela, that the meichen's power caused the midas, the emotions, to automatically, not through convincing, automatically become nullified. That through the mind, and this is specifically through the inner dimension of the mind, it nullifies the emotions. And here again, and this is primarily in Chachma. This light of the energy of the mind also radiates within the midas, bittul. And because the mind fundamentally is bittul, is ayin, is not self-oriented, they also affect bittul in the midas. We need an example of this.
Why is it more
Chachma is because Chachma is ayin and bina is yesh. At the end of the day, when you break it down, bina is my understanding. So bina is closer to the midas than Chachma is in a certain way. Chachma senses the flaw, the awesomeness of the divine. Yeah, but it's not bina. You said it has to protect bina. So that's why it's primarily Chachma. Yeah, but it's not bina. So you keep saying primarily. He's not saying only.
But it's still through bina.
Why are you saying that? That's not relevant here. Shemera gam mitzvah but Ayin Beis is bar the common Perek Reish Nun Gimel 253. Look at later 253. There probably helps explain the second. The first one I explained. The second one, what would be an example of the second one? See, the second one is also not by command or by order. It's also affecting it. It's just saying it's a deeper. I don't know if that would be the right example. I think because pnimi samechin. It sounds to me maybe what you said is one way example, that it's like the midas sense that this is not appropriate because of that, but
is always built to a chacham. And it's not because he understands anything, but there's an Indian.
No, the midas being buttled, not the midas being buttled.
I understand. The Amor is a person who's not psychical. He just is buttled to a chacham.
But how is midas being buttled?
That's it. He's midas. He accepts the chacham.
But that's he's not midas not fault. He accepts the chacham.
He's not accepting the sacred law. Just the fact that there's a chacham.
So how is that chesed? What is the Paris Netzach? How is that the midas?
What is the Amor besides midas?
Because he says intelligence is understanding.
But it usually works the opposite way. When you have midas, it usually, especially if they're not developed and they're wild, they accept the chachma.
That's what I'm saying.
That's like a baby.
That you see that a person who respects the chacham is not because he's, like it.
we have to look at Perek Reish Nun Gimel. I remember it vaguely, but You could have some passages. You could have also another example. I need to really look into it more to see what the example would be. I think like this, that midis, which are part and also speak to this, see sometimes, for example, a person is very much involved in a very deep and important mission or subject. So even though the midis have their inclinations, but the bittul of the meichen can cause a bittul that the midis will just respect and defer to the intelligence at that moment. I would say something like that. Now this is specifically when the emotions are such that they feel within them the light, the energy of intelligence. And therefore they become nullified because of this energy and this revelation. All this that we just spoke about, Meichen and Midas, is in a form of hislabshus. Intelligence manifests in the Midas, in the emotions. Not in a form of dominance and control and authority. That's what he discusses later. But the second way, the first way, it's hisaskus. The mind is busy training and educating and guiding the emotions. In the second way, it doesn't need to guide, its bittul automatically causes the emotions to have bittul. The pa'ula shebederech shlita ein ze sheyesh lam eze erech v'shaychus sheyenirgish hapayel. Because something that affects something in a form of control, dominance, it's not because it's not because yeshlam eze erech v'shaychus sheyenirgish hapayel. It's not because the thing that it's affecting, that it's dominating over, has some type of commensurate proportion, ratio, and shaychus and relationship to the force that's controlling it. That it should sense and feel the energy that affects it. In Midas, the Midas feel and sense the mind, either through training, that's hisaskus involvement and commitment, or because they sense it because they have the relationship with them. When it comes to something that is the ki'im, rather, so when a king orders somebody, it's not because the subject has a relationship with the king, understands him, relates to him, and so on. No. Because this dominating force is a higher force, and a powerful force. It therefore affects because of its intensity, because of its takeif, its sheer power.
That's right.
Yeah. By mind and heart and mind and emotions, intelligence and emotions and feelings, it's not because of intensity. It's it's because of their relationship, because of their connection to each other and relationship with each other. Or in the first way, the outer dimension of intelligence and that affect the midas, that train the midas, bechinas chlishus and weakening the midas, the emotions, or in the inner dimension of intelligence, bittul, in a form of subjugation. Let's not use subjugation. Form of causing them to be nullified or causing them to be humbled.
I think the difference between both these cases is the first one is that the midas have to be bechinas chlishus. The second one, the midas could be in the same.
No, because if you look before, look before he says no. When real his gabrus, even the second one won't work. That's what it looks like, because they have to have some receptivity, and you see that factually. Look, there are midas that Meichen does not affect. So, v'yesh shemeich shalt alev.
But A and B is basically both quantitative. It's sort of the same thing. One is more bittul and the other one is more framed. And it's like one is
fine, they're both hislabshus. He says they're both because of relationship. The question is, I don't know about that. I think it's more than quantitative.
Very much so, because things in it, he says.
I just told you, first of all, pale, it's not that way, so you can't be contradicting fact. The fact is that sometimes the Mayach doesn't control them. According to you, it should always be controlled, either one way or the other. Pale, it's not like that. Secondly, if you read before the two Efanim, look at the line there. He says there's Gabrus It's only when there's no Gabrus. Or else it undermines the whole case, because if it's always doing it, that means the Meich can always, by Rotzen, even if it's totally Gabrus, it will be able to dominate. V'yesh shemeich, another level is v'yesh shemeich shalt al alev gam al pnimis alev, and then there's a state where the mind dominates, control, shalt al alev rules. So shalit here meaning not the shlita is using by Rotzen, gam al pnimis alev, that it also rules and affects the inner dimension of the heart. He's now introducing a new thing, pnimis alev. V'hainu b'chinas is galus v'izgabas hameichin v'yeser. So a third level here is that it affects also the inner dimension of the heart, and that's through a revelation and his gabrus hameichin, a particular overpowering dimension of intelligence, an increasingly powerful dimension of intelligence, expression of intelligence. And this level is by someone who's a sichli be'etzem. He's a fundamental intellectual, he's a fundamental, his mind is sichli be'etzem. Shekol inyonav v'chol ha'negosav him rak sichlim. Everything about him and all his behavior, all his lifestyle, everything about him is only seichel, are not all governed by seichel. You know such a person? No, please, no. So by a person like this, when he reveals the energy of his mind, his brain power, has a shelet gam al pnimis halev. It controls also the inner dimension of the heart. Shalei yispashtus b'midas. Gam b'teikafay yispayla shalahem. That the midas should not be an expression of the emotions. Also in their level of intensity and hispaylas and their excitement. Shezeu gam kim derech hislabshus. So even this third dimension he just introduced is also in a form of hislabshus. It's also not what's the word, autocratic, a dictatorship, a dictator. Yeah. That's why someone who's not a sichli be'etzem, someone who's not this way, that doesn't have this like, because fundamentally he's ruled by seichel. Which means that the light of the mind is not revealed in a atzmi, in a fundamental, essential light. And the midas are not on that level of meichen, like by this person. I'll take of his spilas amidas. He's unable to overpower the intensity and the excitement of the emotions. So we see here too requires the mind's
That negates my assumption.
Huh?
This line negates my assumption.
I'm telling you also before, if you read it, I would say level 2 can probably do more than level 1. But the question is, so here too you see the intervention of intelligence. It's not just that a person stop controlling the midas. It's the mind, because the seichel be'etzem, that's why he's able to achieve this level. This level needs to be explained a little more, but let's go on. However, the effect of desire is in a form of autocratic, of command. How would you say shlita? Dominion, dominance, command, order, authority. Rulership. Being that it's a higher power, v'takif, and very intense and strong. It causes bittul in all the faculties that they should be nullified before this desire, for this will. Okay.
Feeling those behaviors of bittul, or the feeling of the etzem seichel, why we're calling that a pnimi.
Well, seichel is always pnimi, no matter what. Seichel is always a pnimi.
Just by definition, it seems even though that the ratzon is taken, the others also have a quality that doesn't really give much space for the midos. It just overcomes them.
No, so exactly what the point exactly. He just explained on which level you're talking about, the first, second, or third.
I'm talking about the second.
No. The fact is, as I just said, if that's the case, why is it that sometimes emotions are not controlled by intelligence?
It's not strong enough.
What?
It's not strong
Okay, that means it's not. It doesn't have that authority over it. That's exactly right. And Ratzon is strong enough.
It's strong.
Okay, so that's the key difference. Yes, because it's not strong enough because one is they're on the same level. They're hislabshus. That's what he says. They're kalim to me. They're on the same level. So it's like two people in the same league. So of course, someone from a higher league is more powerful. There's always going to be more powerful. That's exactly the point. That's number one. Number two, even in level 2 and 3, it's because intelligence is in some way impacting on the emotions. There's some type of rational impact here. This isn't just some type of command. First of all, you have to understand midas and moichin speak to each other. They're both part of one entity, the human being. And secondly, as I said, so the moichin, both in level 2 for sure and level 3 also. It's very simple. Moichin has the midas respect and recognize this element of the moichin, so they defer to them. It's convinced, not because it's been ordered. It's convinced. That's the bottom line. And in Ratzon, it's being ordered, commanded. And it's not just not words also. It's the content. By nature, intelligence is a communicator. By nature, intelligence is not a commander. It's a trainer. It's an educator. If someone has obstinance, that's not coming from intelligence. Intelligence has patience, it communicates. He's not saying all that, but I'm just explaining. Its whole nature and personality is an educator.
Educated means there's a response from the educated, commensurate to what's given over. Here we're saying that...
No, I'm sorry. No. Educator is an educator. Sometimes you defer to the educator because you relate to it exactly. Sometimes you defer because you respect, but there's a relationship.
In other words, we're saying that it doesn't tell the leader what to do, but because there's a certain quality by the educator, as you're saying, the respect. Therefore, I
just gave one example. I can give you 50 different examples. That's just one.
Therefore, it just falls in line.
I don't use the word fall in line. It says it will be humbled.
It will be humbled,
and it will repress its natural intensity.
Okay, it'll repress its natural tendency. In other words, it's the pnimi, the pnimi's heritage of the mida is not explained. It's just overwhelmed. No. I'm sorry. No, I don't see that at all. It's clearly seichel does not work by overwhelming. Seichel works by communicating. Sometimes it communicates and the midah can relate to it. Sometimes the midah relates to the bittul of it. Like a person sees. A human being, let's talk practical. A human being you may be hungry, but your mind is involved in something very profound and very important. As it's developed something very important and very profound, the midah says, you know what? I'll defer to this because it's also in my interest. Okay? And then there's, of course, the third level where the meichin atzmi is such that affects even the deepest part of the heart, but they're communicating. It's all a relationship that communicates. Remember, the midas are interested in their own interest. Now, that interest sometimes is sees that it's important to hear what the mind has to say, because the mind has something important to say. Sometimes it understands it perfectly. This is not good, like the chitzeni is chalishus. Sometimes it relates to the bittul of it. Like I said, if you are involved in an important thing, and your mind is completely intense, the midas suddenly are distracted, they want something else. But they will defer, because it's also in their interest to defer. That is absolutely a relationship type of thing. Now, there are times when the midas are so intense, and the mind can't do anything about it. And that proves that sometimes the midas are receptive, and sometimes they're not. And when they're not, the mind can do nothing about it. It comes out that the difference is a mocking, so to speak.
I don't know what you're talking about.
In other words, it's not
I'm speaking, I just gave you an example of human actions. Give me an example in human life tell me an example where the mind... No, listen a second. Give me an example. Okay. I just gave examples of how the midas in their interest defer to the mind without any orders.
Exactly.
And you give me an example where they defer to orders.
Just as we see, there is occasion a person is...
Give me one example. That's all I'm looking for.
Just as we see, as occasionally the person is bittul to somebody else, not because of trouble, just because of the person.
That example does not apply here. This is talking midas and meichin, not people.
I didn't get a chance.
No, that's deferring to an authority.
I told you the same Amaretz and the Chacham, you said the example they gave you.
It's not an example. It's completely not fitting here.
Not a good example.
I didn't hear it. I heard from somebody.
But Ayin Beis gave examples here. I gave you an example. Give me an example where a midah takes a command of the mind and just like a subject to a king. There's no such thing. I just told you. Either the midah is stronger and doesn't listen, and if it does listen, it either listens because it relates somewhat, or because it receives that it's in my interest even though I don't relate, or because it's elevated into the level of the Meichen Be'etzim. All three are not by command, in order. Just think about it. You know what? Think about it and find an example where you see a midah listens like an order of a king, and then we can talk.
But I'm trying to say...
Do you have an example like that?
Yeah, I'm trying to work on it. You'll won't say anything for a moment. I'll try to say it.
No, just say it later. I'll continue meanwhile. Okay. However, the effect of desire is in the form of command, of order. Being that it's a higher power and intense, how do you peel? It affects a type of a subjugation of all the faculties. They should be misbattled before this desire, before this will. So, do you have an example?
Yeah, I was trying to say about 10 minutes.
One example.
I think the difference here that we're talking about, it seems to me the difference here is that we're talking about either pnimi, where there's an accidental relation. Okay,
do me a favor, because this is on recording. If you have an example, I'll take it. If not, we'll talk about it after the class. Okay? No. If you have an example, you'll give it to me after the class. And then I'll bring it into the discussion. I don't want to have a discussion here about makav and pnimi until you give me an example of an emotion that follows an order, a command of the mind. If it's a command, I will tell you it's desire, it's ratzon. If it's not, because the fact of the matter is, mind and heart are both koiches that speak to each other. I want to hear an example. It would be great. I can't find one. Any order or command that emotions shouldn't be doing is purely, if it's a real order that mamish controls, would be, even ratzon, I would wonder, can a person's desire really control emotions? The fact is, we see even that doesn't happen. But there I could say, if a person, for example, is standing in front of the Rebbe, tells him to do something, right there and then, it's like an order, he'll just not do it. Not because of seichel, but because completely deferring to the Ratzon HaMelech. But will it last, is the question. It's another story. But as far as mind and heart, any sublimation of the heart is this. I also would suggest learning chapter 2, where he discusses this, and chapter 253, where he also discusses this.
Your example that you gave before, that somebody was working, let's say, on a project, and in the middle he got distracted because of his emotions, and basically his emotions understood that it's let him work on the project because it's also in his best interest.
That's an example where the mind's bittul, the emotions relate to the mind's bittul, and it causes them also bittul.
Right. So that was one.
Yeah, that's the example I gave for level 2. Yeah. It's an example. There are probably many examples. It's basically, as he's saying, it's two ways to understand how the Meichen communicates to the midas. You have many examples of it. Even in general, even on a daily basis, that we don't just follow wildly our emotions. Is it always because they always understand it may not be good? It's because they basically have they've been trained in general that, you have to follow your intelligence. Doesn't always mean that you get it. You generally midas that are by an adult, I'm talking.
It's like a healthy respect for them, for the Meichen?
Or they're in part of one entity. Like little children, the mind is not yet developed, so they just follow their emotions. Tantrums, this. You get older, the mind has Meir Shalt Alev means that the mind has now trained the heart. You function together. You go to work. You don't just have tantrums. It doesn't always mean you get it. Sometimes your intelligence can actually. Basically, if you read the words, he's saying it's essentially the self-control that the mind has developed in a human being. But if the midas are gabras b'yesid, they suddenly take control, and the mind says nothing, can say nothing.
Right, because when somebody goes off the shiksa, for example, at that level, you try to explain.
Or some other. We all have our taivas that are very powerful.
You try to explain to them that it's the wrong thing and everything. They have in love, and that's at that point already. That's this gabras midas, right?
Right. Yeah. Any big, strong emotional reaction. You have to put everything in context and not look just at the lines here. The context is that Meichen and Midas are both in the same domain. They're both faculties. It would be like the arms and the legs and the rest of the body. They all have faculties, but they work together. Meichen and Midas work together, generally speaking. The question is how they work together. As soon as you work together, that's a cooperation. They're not. Ratzon doesn't work together. Ratzon is a king. He's a leader.
In other words, they don't work together. They don't have two different desires.
They may have two different interests. They have definitely Midas is interested in what it wants, and Meichen is interested in reflecting on something better and higher. Meichen is objective. Midas are subjective.
So
that's clear.
Them together,
No, what's keeping them together is that they are keiches pnimi in one body. What keeps your eyes and your ears coordinated? The way it's created. That's the structure of Eretz and Kalim.
It's not like two separate things that need a higher...
That's another discussion. How? I would say basically it's because they're Eretz pnimim. Because the structure of Eretz pnimim is such a symbiosis. The emotions know, because of their self-interest, they know they need the rest of the...
It came from the Meichen. The Meichen is their source.
It's a whole different discussion. Not necessarily. No. Later he speaks the exact opposite. The Midas don't come from Meichen. They're trained through Meichen. But the point of the matter is not because of coming. Right now it's just that there are, relative here, it's a structure. So you may have different interests, you have conflicting interests, but the way they deal with it is negotiation, compromise, discussion, deference. It's like a relationship between a husband and wife. There's no commander there, there's no king. They're both equals. Yeah. Don't get personal here. Okay, Mashenkin Arotzen, Pulis Arotzen, B'derech Shlita Shalish, V'yuven Ze Yesu B'salmas HaKeches. And we'll understand this even better with the B'salmas HaKeches, with the faculties that are concealed. Sh'arotzen B'kech Lifel She'salam Eze Kech L'gamri. The Rotzen desire can affect that a faculty should be completely concealed. She'en Ze B'kech HaSeichel, She'en B'kech L'hailam Eze Kech L'gamri. Power of intelligence does not have that power to conceal a faculty completely, to repress. Yeah, they couldn't hear. It can limit. One second. What time is it now?
10:20.
I'll go a few more minutes. Intelligence can limit the flow. That it shouldn't express, it shouldn't extend, only in a limited fashion. He can limit it in this specific expression, detail, and replace it.
Another expression to be channeled in another area.
That's what I think he means. Channeled, maniach, and he actually means to place.
Expression to be channeled in another.
Another expression. This is very abstract. Let's think of an example. Maybe we'll give an example. And the power of desire, on the other hand, is to completely conceal. I'll give you an
example.
What's the example?
No, for example, if somebody has this tendency to spill blood, so we say channel that to become a sheikh, to become a mayah, but he cannot totally eliminate it. We say channel that expression into something else, into another property. That's the sheikh. You're training yourself through your sheikh to express that tendency.
But is that accurate? For example,
express that tendency that you have into another area.
I'm not sure what he means by Salmus HaKeches. That's the thing that's bothering me. What means Salmus HaKeches Legamri?
You cannot totally eliminate.
No, let's say tell me what Ratzon does. And what does Ratzon do?
Right, so Ratzon can totally eliminate it.
Put your foot in hot water.
Totally eliminate it.
You know?
Give me an example. How does Ratzon eliminate a faculty? Conceal it completely. Well, one second. The mind can tell the body to close its eyes. You close your eyes, you don't see anything. Completely concealed. I'm thinking simple like that. You can tell an emotion. Let's say an emotion wants something. The mind can, convince it, not convince it. And it's not like the.
But the story of the Rebbe Shab is a story.
Maybe that's what he's referring to, but I don't think he means that, because that's a very unique story.
Maybe it's there, but he's proving that that's like.
But I don't think he's saying that.
That's
Yeah.
you could actually you could be misalik a kayach from a certain area.
Okay, let me continue reading. I'm not sure what he means or understanding the. Let me see. Kamoy kain hu bi salmus hakecha shadei seichel iyav shaliyas salmus lagamri. Same thing as with the concealment of the faculties through seichel, through intelligence. It's impossible that it should be completely concealed. Okay, let's see what he says. And through desire, through will, you can completely conceal it. Like we see by Avram, who completely repressed his compassion on Yishmael. I'm sorry, on Yitzchak, b'nei Yechideh. On Yitzchak with Akedah, and his only son. Pashas, he means Akedah, right?
Yeah.
That's all. Here, Avram Avinu, natural love to his son, completely stopped that love by doing something which is the exact opposite of seemingly love. In order to conceal a natural midah, a natural feeling, completely. That cannot be in the power of intelligence, it's the power of desire, of will. Avram was completely committed and dedicated to the Ratzna Elyon, the higher will. And through this Ratzna Leki, his, or it's maybe God's Ratzna Elyon, that he deferred to. Either way, Ratzon is what controlled the compassion, the Rachama. Okay, he's giving examples. The same as Mesiris Nefesh. So behechlich oyadei salmus kol hakechis. Two ways. Mesiris Nefesh is behechlich. Yeah. Mesiris Nefesh, which is also compelled, forced, coerced. Either Mesiris Nefesh, because you're concealing all the faculties altogether, so you should not feel yourself at all, so therefore your interest has completely been so-called repressed. Or because of the opposite, because of the abundance of all the faculties, that they all feel now that because of godliness everything is worth it. Interesting. So this is only possible through the power of ratzon, desire, will. And all this is because the way ratzon reveals itself, the way ratzon functions, is that its essence is revealed. That's why it affects in a form of shlita, of dominance. Because of the intensity of its power, because of its dominant power. Either in completely concealing all the faculties, or in revealing all the faculties in an abundant, in an increased form of expression. Like it's Mesiris Nefesh, he says in the parentheses. He's giving another example. So Mesiris Nefesh is one place where the Ratzon causes all, like it causes all the faculties to go into overdrive. It's like a whatchamacallit, what are they called? That steroid. And also, generally, when all the faculties are revealed through desire, that they could come out in a form of bligvul. Like it says, when a person, you should learn where your heart desires. When there's a desire, chafetz, it causes all of you to want to be there in a far deeper way than intelligence or other faculties will cause. This is also the reason why the general movement of all the organs is specifically through desire, and why organs don't move on their own. There's no movement. Hainu ma'achayis hamalubish behem sheyesh behem hatva l'tnuah dekol chayim snaneya. Why don't they move on their own? They have energy within them by nature. They have natural energy inside of them, life force. And we say kol chayim snaneya. They have natural energy with them to move. Because it says kol chay, everything that's alive moves. So why don't they move on their own? Why does someone has to tell them to move? Nevertheless, they won't move on their own because of the quality of energy and life force within them. Only when there's a desire. There's no desire, they won't move specifically. When it arises in his will to move his arm or his leg, that's only then does it move. The actual movement is not coming from someone else. It's not like another force is moving the hand. The actual tenuah comes from the power within the actual organs. In order for the tenuah to bring the catalyst that causes it to actually move, is through the desire. The desire sparks, and then the actual organ moves. So that's why chol chayim snaneya, but not on its own without the command. V'gam tenuah pisemis, and even a reflexive movement, there's reflexive movement that doesn't come through deliberate intention. Shabbat bli bchira, that comes without choice, spontaneous, reflexive. Gam hi ba min harotzen dafka v'nikra tenuah detzenis. That also comes specifically from desire, and it's called tenuah detzenis. Why is it called tenuah detzenis? Meaning, he means almost like a reflexive. Tenuah detzenis, you think it means a movement by will. Oh.
My question is, a child is constantly moving. Is he doing it because he's ratzin?
Ratzin doesn't necessarily mean conscious desire. Like, I consciously want to do something. Let's see. Let's see where he goes. Gam beis ashina tenuah hi detzenis v'lei nafshis. Also during sleep, the movement is detzenis v'lei nafshis. It's not just coming naturally from the nefesh, it has some type of retzenis. That's because of the image, you could say, the impression, the dimyan that remains, gidei harotzen, the nerves of the desire that remain even during sleep. In other words, what he's trying to say is now a new level. One second. He's trying to say is that desire is when you want something, then there's reflexive behavior, reflexive. When it's reflexive, he's saying that also comes through that some gidim. It would be almost like, it's not so complicated, because if you think about it, look this. When we're asleep, your also energy is going into your breathing, and other things are happening. It's reflexive, but you can't say it's just coming from another force. It's still the kista de chayusa, the neshama, and even the mind, the dreaming, or whatever thing happens. And
the fan still turning.
I wouldn't say that. Here, you're not pulling the plug. You're weakening the plug.
The flow.
Right. But the flow is still going through the regular gidim. Blood is still flowing through you. Everything is slower and so on. So he's basically saying it's not like everything's shut off and the ratzon no longer is controlling now something else. Another force is reflexively. It's still coming through the ratzon, but not in a desire. And it's not a desired ratzon as you will it. It's a ratzon simply as being the force that controls movement. He's adding something that he's not said now till now.
A dreamy state instead of an awake state.
Here we go. Gam beis ashina. And he's saying something even more. The decision you make. What time is it now? 10:30. 10:30. Here, the interesting thing. When you make a decision, like you want to wake up 6:30 or other things. Yeah. And you see people also move back their yarmulke on their head when they're asleep, and other things like that. The decision, the resolution you make, everything you make before the sleep affects even during your sleep. That's proving the case. So in other words, if you make a ratzon, a desire to want something before you go to sleep, it continues to affect. Meaning to say, sleep is not, in other words, even when the reflexive is somewhat under the impression. That's why a person is always responsible. An ox needs to gore someone 3 times to become a muad. Meaning, there's a sher tame, meaning the first time it's considered to be maybe an aberration. Second, third time, chazak, he could rely that the shar is a dangerous one. The human being is adam mu'ad la'ilam. He's always responsible. Both when he's awake and when he's asleep. Because at the end of the day, his movement he has control over his movement. Even reflexive. For example, if a person, what's the din? If a person breaks a keli in the middle of his sleep, he's responsible. Contain him. Also, when you run on Friday, you're not responsible. Huh? No, first of all, he's saying, no, there are things you decide upon. No, but it means, in other words, one second, let's put it this way, you're responsible because there's somewhat control. And without will, desire, there would never be any movement. I'm sorry. Where did I say la'ilam there? My own addition, la'itiyah b'hatanua. Oh, okay. Where? On top of what? All right, okay, I'm sorry, my mistake. Fine. Will not be movement. Like we know in the illness of mania, which I'm not... Huh?
Paralysis, yeah?
Mano.
No.
I'm not sure. I think this is more like a stroke or paralysis.
Manic.
No, for sure not that. No. This is more, the mania, I have to look it up because it's another place in Chassidus. It's not a paralysis on the function of the level of, God forbid, the body. Let's say a part of the body is paralyzed. It's more a function in the brain, that something in the brain, in the mind, the desire, that something doesn't let you move. Something that they can't identify it, and they can't identify the problem in the faculties or in the organs. It's something something neurological. See, that's why I was saying before about neurological and desire, but it still goes through. He says gidei harotzen.
That's a problem.
Yeah. So, what is it? Shemistalik harotzen min hatnua. We have to do more research what this illness called mania is, what it is in English. So that's part of homework. That mistalik the desire has been removed from movement. Oz yanuach ke'evan daimon bli shum tnua, and then the organ rests like a dead stone, like an inanimate stone. Bli shum tnua. Daimon also comes from the word silence. Anyway, an inanimate stone without any movement. Hagam sheyesh b'keich hatnua chaychayunis, even though it's still there and it's alive, you see that it's not. We're not talking about a situation where, God forbid, like gangrene, or something that you need to cut it off because it's lost its blood supply and it's like just dead. It could be dangerous. It's still alive and it still has keichatun achiyunis, the power of movement of life, and like he said before, it's there. Nevertheless, it's not there because there's something that is affecting the desire, something that's not letting the desire speak to the parts of the body. And the reason for this is because the movement, does he mean she'in hatnu or she'in harotzen? He wants to say she'in harotzen hu b'derech shlita memshala. Okay. He means the rotzen for tenua. That's what he means. The desire for movement, that is in a form of control and command over the organs and the faculties. She's pashtu. Either they should extend or she's kaftu, or they should withdraw. They should what's iskaftu? Not diminish, not
Spread out.
when you say there's a word for it.
Flex or extend?
Flex and extend and
Something gets tightened up. Like
no, the opposite of extend.
Yeah, the muscles
It's flex.
Iskaftu. No, means flex and extend is the same. The opposite of extend. Iskaftu. Withdraw or repress. In other words, they should move outward. Okay. Sometimes they say contract. Maybe contract.
Yeah. Contract or relax.
Contract as opposed to expand.
Yeah.
Expand or contract. Yeah, that's it. Yes, that's what it means.
Two different models using the one wrong one.
No, that's not correct what he's saying. What
They're
he's
not
saying.
opposites physiologically.
Expand and contract are not opposites. Fine. So don't call them opposites, but it's expand and contract. Call it expansion and contraction. The heart expands and it contracts. And this control is in the power of desire, specifically because the energy and the life force that's within the organs do not have this power to force the organs to move. Rather, only the rotzen does, the desire. Because it's a fundamental, essential keich, which is relatively separate from all the and apart from the other faculties. That's why it has the power of control over the movement of the movement of life. The dynamic power of movement, either to extend or to contract. Expand or contract. And also the way the desire affects the revelation of faculties, also the revelation of seichel, of intelligence. It's also in a force of coercion and authority. That he brought earlier, because what it says in Razal, that a person should always learn where their heart desires. That the chofetz, the desire, causes automatically that the mind should open up, that it should conceive and understand ideas by inyan and inyan. In other words, the mere fact that he desires to go there, makom refers to the makom, the place where to study. Sometimes also they say it as the place, the physical place or the place in the Torah. Yeah, but sometimes they also say makom shel b'chofetz, where
the yeshivas usually, but the music means the place of
the Rabbi uses it also to the area. But bottom line is your desire. Suddenly, well, what changed? You want to study here, wherever it is. Why do you have to? Why your desire to go elsewhere to a particular area? Because there's something about it that compels intelligence to flow. It's a compelling force. Because of the dominance, the superiority of desire over intelligence, that's why in a thing that he desires, automatically the energy of the seichel automatically flows. This is not like intelligence that comes through exertion, through effort. That's when you struggle, that's when the refinement of the container brings and draws down more intelligence, because the container became more conducive. So if you tell somebody, struggle with this subject, even though it's not what you want to desire, yes, it'll do it more. It's more like the seichel and the midas. It communicates. It's a negotiation, it's a dialogue. But when the desire says it, there actually a higher force compels the intelligence to flow. The way desire expresses itself is that its essence extends, transmits. And that's why its effect is in a form of dominance, of authority, of command. The Meichin b'midas, the effect of meichin and midas, the immanent faculties, intelligence and emotions, is to govern them, hanigam, to guide them. Ulas is bittul, and to cause them to have bittul, to have some type of humility. Hu b'chinas kiruv, it's all in the form of kiruv. It's close communication. That's why it depends on the milas hameichin, on the quality of the intelligence, and the way they function, the way they revealed. Ubamilas hanifel, shein amidus, and the quality of the nifel, the one that's being impacted, that's the emotions. He doesn't use those words in the pnim, I think. So in other words, he's talking here how they communicate to each other. Desire affects through a higher power. Both in the revelation of the faculties, and both and also in the concealment of the faculties. And because of this, the desire can completely conceal keiches, like we spoke about Avram, Mesiras Nefesh. And also can cause that the hisgalus should be intense, very intense. And all this is automatic without any effort. Like the revelation of intelligence on its own, that comes through effort. And that's why also the movement of the organs. Even though it directly comes from the force, the energy within them. It's dependent on the power of desire, because that is the owner, the controller. It's the controlling force, and that's specifically with the power of desire. Okay, we finished chapter 51, pages 89 through 91.